After Loki's flashback and the beginning of his testimony about the death of his father, right in front of Luffy and his brother Hajrudin, the internet exploded with theories trying to piece together the murder of King Harald, the former ruler of Elbaf. At first, all signs pointed to Loki himself. Was it revenge? Ambition? Then suspicion shifted toward Yarol, seen by many as a potential traitor. But the latest flashback changed everything. Suddenly, both Loki and Yarol appeared innocent. And instead, the real shocker was King Harald himself, whose actions now seem morally gray at best. He had been making deals with the world government willingly, so the real question becomes, who really killed King Harald? This isn't your typical betrayal arc. What we're looking at is a slow unraveling of choices, mysterious, calculated decisions made throughout Harald's lifetime. His repeated dealings with the celestial dragons and his frequent visits to Joie weren't just political duties. They might have been intentional, not forced, but chosen, which brings us to the flashback from 100 years ago. Harald, in his wild youth, attacked a mysterious fortress on a distant island, but the motive wasn't riches or glory, it was love. He was chasing a queen whose beauty was the stuff of legends, and it turns out that queen might have been Hajrudin's mother. Her influence completely transformed him. She took a brutal, impulsive warrior and turned him into a man who valued peace, who was willing to make sacrifices. This wasn't just a romantic subplot, it was a catalyst for a shift in Elbaf's future. Maybe it was her who convinced him to negotiate with the world government, not out of weakness, but as a strategic move to protect his people, or to honor an ancient, forgotten promise. They say love is the greatest force of change, and in Harald's case, that couldn't be truer. His transformation wasn't about political maturity or guilt over his past. It was about her. His love for the queen wasn't fleeting. It was deep enough to make a king of Elbaf, a land built on war and pride, bow to diplomacy, even if it meant tarnishing his legacy as a warrior. Because when the heart gets involved, logic bends, pride breaks, and even the strongest kings can choose peace, if it means protecting the one person who made them believe in something greater than battle. Let's rewind to that pivotal moment, when King Harald summoned both Loki and Yarol to his throne room. It felt less like a meeting, and more like a final confession, a last will, a hidden truth ready to be revealed before the end. And the fact that he chose them, only them, says everything. It was trust. It was foresight. Deep down, Harald must have sensed that his time was running out, and only Loki and Yarol were worthy of hearing the truth. But fate had other plans. Before they could arrive, disaster struck. Imu-sama had already seized control of King Harald's body, just like she's doing now with Gonko. Using her dark, mysterious abilities, she twisted him into a demonic shell of his former self. The once proud king was now an unrecognizable monster, cold-eyed, merciless, attacking his own soldiers without hesitation. His men were frozen, not with fear of death, but with the unbearable weight of betrayal. This wasn't an enemy, this was their king, and yet they had no choice. In a desperate bid for survival, they raised their weapons against him, shaking, hesitant, hearts torn between loyalty and fear. Every stab they made was a cry of pain, not hatred. That's when Loki and Yarol walked in, and what they saw was pure horror. Corpses strewn across the floor, blood everywhere. And at the center of it all, Harald, transformed, eyes burning, turning toward them like a beast awakened. And that's when the real battle began. Harald, possessed, enraged, wiped out the last of his men and lunged straight for Yarol. The man who once stood beside him as a brother in arms was now just another target. With a brutal, direct strike to the head, he fell, cut down by the very sword meant to protect Elbaf. At that exact moment, the last emotional barrier between father and son shattered. Loki no longer stood as a son. He stood as a warrior, not fighting out of anger, but out of duty, because the creature in front of him wasn't his father anymore. It was a puppet, a vessel, a demon animated by a will far greater than theirs, a will named Imu-sama. But here's the harsh truth. Imu-sama's power was far beyond anything Loki could handle alone. Even with rage and sorrow fueling every strike, even with the memory of his father still fresh in his heart, Loki's bravery and battle prowess simply weren't enough to stop the demonic force controlling King Harald's body. Imu crushed him. She dropped Loki to the ground like he was nothing, then walked right past him. Because her true objective wasn't the throne. It was the hidden vault beneath the castle, the place where Elbaf's legendary fruit was was kept, the most sacred symbol of the giant's history, strength, and pride. And that shadowy figure we saw standing before the fruit's chest, that was King Harald, but not really. His body was a hollow shell, a puppet moved by Imu's will. She wasn't just after power, she was after domination. If she could claim that fruit, Elbaf, the last great stronghold resisting the world government, would fall under her heel. But Loki wasn't done yet. Bleeding, broken, spirit shattered. Still he rose and chased after her into the vault, driven by one burning instinct: protect Elbaf's legacy at all costs. And when all else failed, he made the unthinkable choice. He ate the fruit, not for glory, not for revenge, but to keep it out of her hands. He knew what it meant. It would change his fate forever. But in that moment, hesitation was a luxury he couldn't afford. And then came the moment everything turned. Imu was seconds away from ending him. Her control absolute, her wrath unstoppable, until two legends from the old era stepped in, Shanks and Gaban. Their arrival flipped the entire game board. They understood. What was happening in Elbaf wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a piece of a much larger design, a centuries-old plan unfolding in real time. Together, they disrupted Imu's parasitic hold on King Harald's body, and it was Gaban, the man many thought lost to history, who delivered the final blow, not out of hatred, not for revenge, but because it was the only way to free Harald's soul. In that moment, mercy had no place. The king had to die, so Imu could be purged. And as her essence slipped away into the shadows, what remained was ruin, a shattered castle, a fallen king, and a son left to carry the burden of Elbaf's legacy and its most sacred weapon. And with King Harald lying lifeless, his end delivered in a blow soaked with sorrow and inevitability, Loki stood before an impossible choice. Two paths, both devastating. Either reveal the truth that his father, the great king of Elbaf, had been nothing more than a puppet, possessed by a demon ruling the world from the shadows. Or take the fall himself and bear the burden of being branded a traitor, a thief, and a kingslayer in the eyes of his people. There was no easy way out, but Loki's heart, still tethered to the image of the noble father he remembered, refused to tarnish Harald's legacy, no matter how undeniable the truth had become. So, he made his choice. He chose to stain his own name so that his father's could remain pure. He turned to Yarol, who had miraculously survived the fatal blow, and gave him a single command: tell them I did it. Tell them I killed the king. Tell them I stole the fruit. This wasn't just a lie. It was a sacrifice. A carefully planned deception that buried the truth deep beneath honor and loyalty. And then came the hardest part. Loki approached Shanks, who had witnessed everything, and what he asked of him shocked even the red-haired emperor. Arrest me. Chain me, lock me away in the depths of the underworld. He didn't want freedom. He didn't seek redemption. All he wanted was to preserve the legacy of a father who, in his final years, had chosen peace, and who was never truly responsible for the atrocities committed through his body. And so, the Prince of Elbaf faded into legend, not as a hero, but as a villain, not as a savior, but as a thief. In the eyes of his people, Loki became the traitor who murdered a beloved king and stole the pride of a nation. But in truth, he was something far greater. He was the silent guardian of a legacy, a martyr in disguise, the only one brave enough to bear the weight of a lie so that the memory of King Harald could shine forever. His sacrifice was never sung, but it was, without a doubt, the noblest act of all.